All right, we are ready to go for the super blood wolf moon eclipse of January 20, 2019. Moon is rising behind me. In about 3 hours, the eclipse is going to begin. So I'm using two pieces of equipment tonight to view the eclipse. One is my 3.5-inch ETX telescope. It's a smaller telescope. It's on a go-to mount, which means I can slew it to the moon and it'll track automatically, so I don't have to keep adjusting it. And I use this telescope primarily for viewing the sun and the moon, occasionally some of the brighter planets, but mainly it's for the moon and the sun, and it's actually a perfect telescope for viewing the eclipse. And then I also have the binoculars on a tripod, so it stabilizes the view, so I don't have to keep adjusting it. Again, the binoculars are here. I got my red dot finder up there. And again, ideal for just focusing on one object like the moon. Wow. Now the moon is rising now. It's really spectacular. You can see all the surface details. Again, this is a supermoon, so it's larger than usual because it's at its closest point to Earth in its orbit. So it's at perigee and a little bit larger than you would see otherwise. So we not only have a lunar eclipse, but also a supermoon. Really spectacular. All right, it is 10 o'clock p.m. Central Time. You can see the partial eclipse has begun, and it's engulfed about 40% of the moon. You can really see the curvature of the Earth's shadow projected onto the moon. And of course, this is how they determined thousands of years ago that the Earth was in fact round. And you can also see the relative proportions of the Earth with respect to the moon, that it's much larger than the moon. So yeah, we're about a half hour into the partial phases, and the next 45 minutes we'll see the moon slowly engulfed by the penumbral shadow of the Earth, and then eventually when it starts moving into the umbra of the Earth, then it'll start to turn that blood red that is so characteristic of a blood moon. All right, it's 10 o'clock, and we're about 50% of the way through the partial phases of the eclipse. If I look in my telescope, I can see the penumbral shadow has engulfed about half of the moon, and at the very bottom I can start to see it turn red, indicative of it moving into the umbra. So we're about 50% of the way through the partial phase, and about to start to see the moon slowly turn red as we get into the blood moon phase. All right, so we are now about 3/4 through the partial phase, and you can see in the lower right there that the moon is starting to turn red as we get into the umbral phase, and of course that's totality. So now the moon is going to start turning red as it moves into the partial phase, as it moves into the out of the partial phase and into totality. All right, we're in the final stages of the partial. You can see the last sliver of moon that is about to be immersed into the Earth's shadow. And in the lower right, you can start to see the moon turning that blood red, which is characteristic of it entering the umbral shadow and the totality phase of the lunar eclipse. So, you know, this is really where you see the moon as a sphere, a three-dimensional object when it goes through a total lunar eclipse like this. It's really spectacular. All right, so we are in totality now, and see that most of the disk of the moon has been blocked out. A little bit of light on one of the limb yet, but it's now starting to turn that reddish orange, deep red color that's indicative of a blood moon. So we are now entering the middle of totality. January the 20th, 2019. I'd say a better experience this year than last year. All right, so it is 11 o'clock Central Time. We're about to the middle of totality now, and the view with the binoculars has been spectacular, as well as the telescope. Interestingly enough, for viewing a total lunar eclipse, binoculars are typically a better choice because you get to use both eyes, and it gives you more of a three-dimensional effect during totality. So you really get to see the moon as a ball, as a sphere. So in that way, it's better to use binoculars for viewing a total lunar eclipse, where you can use both eyes, as opposed to a telescope where you only use one eye. But it's been a spectacular evening, cold. January the 20th, about 22 degrees outside Fahrenheit right now, and it's just been quite an experience. So we're at mid-totality right now. The blood moon is coming out, and in about 30 minutes, totality will start to wrap up. All right, so it is almost midnight Central Time, and you can see the totality is ending, and the moon is moving out of the Earth's shadow and gradually getting brighter. This may be just as dramatic as seeing it on the front end of the eclipse, where it moves into the shadow. On the back end, when it moves out of the shadow and gets gradually brighter, is just as equally dramatic. And unlike a solar eclipse, where once totality is over, it's a little anticlimactic, with a lunar eclipse, actually when it leaves totality, it can be just as spectacular, maybe even more spectacular. So the back end of a lunar eclipse can arguably be the most spectacular part. So you're seeing it gradually get brighter as it moves out of the Earth's shadow. Just a spectacular scene. All right, it's a little after midnight. Totality's ending. The moon is moving out of the Earth's shadow, slowly getting brighter. It's a spectacular scene. So it's been a cold, clear, and all but perfect night to view the lunar eclipse of January the 20th, 2019, the supermoon and the wolf moon. I would say of the three pieces of equipment that I used, the handheld binoculars, the 3.5-inch ETX telescope, and then the binoculars on the stand. As far as viewing the eclipse, by far the binoculars on the stand was probably the best piece of equipment. Able to use both eyes, really get the three-dimensional effect of seeing the moon, especially during totality, when all the different colors are falling on the surface of the moon during the blood moon phase, and you really see it as a three-dimensional object. You really see the moon as a world, as a sphere, immersed in a black sky with some stars around it. And you could actually see the stars on the limb as well. So definitely, if you're viewing a lunar eclipse, I would recommend a set of binoculars, because you can use both eyes, and it really gives you, having that extra, having both eyes available instead of one in a cyclops view through a telescope, gives you a better view of the eclipse. So if I had to recommend any piece of equipment, it would be the binoculars on the stand. That was the best view of the eclipse so far. So yeah, tonight was a success. January the 20th, 2019, the super blood moon, wolf moon, and hey, 2019 is off to a great year so far, great start so far. So clear skies, everyone. Hope you have a great year. Moon setting.